I'm not necessarily proud of what I do. I just happen to be really good at it. And I earn a lot of money. There is nothing stereotypical about my job. I terminate people for a living. That's the bare truth of it. But I'm no psychotic or sociopath. I'm very much sane. Well, as sane as anyone who does this job is. I'm a contract killer, so for my own protection, let's just call me John Stone. There's nothing remarkable really about how I came to be doing what I do. You might think that it's the typical broken home, left with no choice scenario, but that's not it. I came from a comfortable, upper middle class family in Florida. I attended Florida International University, where I was the captain of the soccer team and I even graduated with honors. It was while attending FIU, I discovered my very special talent. There is a gun range a few of the guys like to go to. I tagged along a few times and although hesitant at first, it soon became clear that I was a natural. I was a dead shot, and so my nickname from that day was Deadshot. And then came that fateful day when I really found my calling. A couple of the guys had organized a trip to a hunting reserve located in South Georgia. They catered for deer, hog, and even turkey hunts. 4 of us headed out. A guide joined my friends, Josh, Peter, and I. John loaned me a .243 Winchester, which he said was a good rifle for beginners. About 2 hours into the hunt, I was starting to get a bit flustered. Bored out of my mind, really. When our guide held his fist up. Military style, I thought. He urged all of us to crouch low. I heard a rustle in the bushes off to our right, but I strained to see anything. And suddenly, they came into view. A decent-sized buck, leading 2 smaller deer, all 3 nibbling nervously at the grass around them. I couldn't breathe. What felt like waves of electricity coursed through me as my adrenaline levels spiked. The guide beckoned us forward, slowly. He whispered, "Okay, boys, who's taking the shot?" Josh and Peter had done this before, so they turned to me and said, "All yours, buddy," with wistful smiles. At that same moment, the buck lifted his head. He had heard or sensed something, and before we knew what was happening, he bolted. Without thinking, I stood up. I worked the bolt action. Instinctively tracking the path of the deer and I fired. It dropped. We later discovered that I had hit it just behind the left ear. It was a shot of at least 100 yards at a moving target, and the guide was still boasting about it to his mates back at the main building. What no one knew was the total feeling of satisfaction, of utter accomplishment and peace that filled me. I had found my drug. I had found my calling. One thing led to another, and when the hunt no longer gave me the high that I needed, I sought out a different type of satisfaction, and I fell in with the wrong sort of crowd, and the rest is history. I honed my skill, became adept in the martial arts, and skilled in the use of knives, swords, bow, you name it. By the time that I had reached 30, I'd already taken out 10 targets, each purse bigger than the last. It was just what I did. And that brings me to what happened last fall, and why I will never take another contract in my life. My intermediary set up the meet. It was a small cafe I knew in Jamaica, New York. It was just about twilight when I arrived, and spotted my potential client seated well to the back. He was a fidgety old man, looking about 60, hair all gray and cropped low, with a hat on the table in front of him. He wore a dark coat. It was a bit brisk after all, with winter just starting to spread its fingers. I walked over and I stood at his table. "Mr. Alexandru?" I asked. He looked up, eyes darting from me to the other 6 or so customers in the cafe. In front of him was a cup of coffee, barely touched. He motioned for me to sit. I sat, staring at him in silence. As he was about to speak, however, the waitress came over. I ordered coffee myself and some apple pie. As she walked away, Alexandru followed her every step. Not a trusting fellow, I thought. He placed a folder in front of me. "Mr. Stone," he rasped, "this isn't your ordinary job, and I fear that you may think me a madman when I tell you of it, but I beg that you bear with me." I nodded and I opened the folder. There was a photo of a very striking-looking gentleman, looking to be in his 40s. A touch of gray blended into his sideburns. He had a ruddy look, except for his full pink lips. And then there were the coal black eyes. "He is known as Florin Proprescu." I leaned back and I stared at the man opposite me, who now seemed as pale as milk. "He comes from my motherland of Romania. He has made quite a success for himself in America. But this is no ordinary businessman, Mr. Stone. Proprescu is much, much more than that. He is a fiend, hell's own spawn. A vampire." It was only the genuine fear that I saw on Alexandru's face that kept me from falling off my chair in a fit of laughter. Even so, I could not prevent the sides of my mouth from curling upward. I cleared my throat and I realized that I had made a strange sound when I did. "You think me a madman, a fool. A few screws loose, don't you, Mr. Stone?" I shook my head. "What I think, Mr. Alexandru, is that this is a damn joke, and I will strangle Jacobson for wasting my freaking time." I pushed back my chair and I was about to leave, when he pulled a small briefcase that he had kept out of view onto the table. Looking around to make sure that no one was looking in our direction, he popped it open. $1 million, Mr. Stone. 1 million now, and 1 million when, if you should complete your assignment. I paused, looking at the stacks of brand new Benjamins. He might be mad, but his money certainly looked good. I sat back down. "Listen, you better not be jacking around with me." He shoved the case over. "It's yours." "And what is it you would have of me?" I questioned. "Proprescu took my daughter. It's been 3 weeks and I pray that she is dead. Because, Mr. Stone, there are worse things than death." He pushed over a picture of a stunning young woman, flowing dark hair, olive complexion, and soft brown eyes. "My Maria, gone and taken away. What I want, Mr. Stone, is for you to kill that beast once and for all. And if you should find my Maria, and if she be like him, then put a stake into her heart as well." Did I just enter the freaking Twilight Zone? I wondered. The only thing keeping me there in that moment was the money. This dude had to be off his rocker. Clearly he and this Proprescu individual had some issues, and it seemed his daughter may have found herself a sugar daddy. Whatever happened, this poor old sot seemed to have lost his marbles completely. But hey, if he's paying, it's just another target. Easy money. "Okay, Mr. Alexandru, you have a deal. I'll need some further details and I expect to have the rest of my money ready upon completion." For the first time, he forced a tiny smile. Thank you, Mr. Stone, and may God go with you." I don't think God wants anything to do with the likes of me, I thought. And as I was walking away, I felt a hand grip my right arm. I turned to stare directly at Alexandru, who now stood himself. There are certain ways to kill Nosferatu, Mr. Stone. Your conventional methods won't work. Learn the ways, for there are many truths hidden inside the legends that Stoker and others have written. Wood and fire. I tucked my arm free and I walked out of the cafe. How I wish I had just followed my instinct and told the old fart to go jump off a building. It's 3 weeks later. Taking out a mark is like taking any other test. You need to prepare. So I did my research into Florent Popescu. A recluse but a rich one, which meant getting to him would not be easy. I tried to track his movements, learn his habits, but it was difficult. Popescu hardly left his house, which was heavily guarded, and when he did, it was always in a heavily tinted SUV. He rarely patronized public restaurants, and only occasionally appeared at social events, almost all after dark. A silly coincidence, I thought. Nothing I had seen so far gave any credibility to Alexandru's fantasy that this man was a supernatural creature. Plus, there is no sign of his daughter. I pushed that garbage from my mind. I needed to focus. My opportunity came soon after. Popescu would be attending an open-air cocktail in Philly, starting again just after dusk. The event location was perfect. It stood well away from buildings, with lots of trees to help me gauge wind directions and speeds. I chose to set up my nest in an abandoned apartment complex, which gave me easy access to the railway. A clean shot and a quick escape. The shot would have to be from a distance of about 1,200 yards, but with little distraction, I wasn't worried. On the day of the event, I settled into my position early. I chose a .300 Winchester for the job. The target would be a little beyond the 1,000 yards that the Winchester is known for its accuracy, but with a few modifications and my more than exceptional skill, I was confident that this was as easy as it gets. The guests started to arrive. The event was well lit, and there were waiters milling about. The who's who came out in their finery. I lay about 4 feet back from the window that I had chosen. I was watching each guest walk in the entrance through my scope. The venue was almost filled, and I had just started to think maybe my mark wouldn't show up, when there he was. Popescu wore a tall hat. He was decked in a flowing coat, and had a fashionable walking stick carved from what might have been dark oak. He sported a neat bow tie and a red shirt, and was ushered in by 2 bodyguards, one on either side of him. He was one of those individuals you notice when they enter a room, and soon a line of admirers were floating over to him to shake hands, a kiss here and there, a nod. Slowly, he faced my direction. I checked my indicators. Soon he loomed into sight. His face filled my scope. This was it. That familiar wave of electricity flowed through me. I controlled my breathing. 1, 2, 3. And as I pulled the trigger, I swear he looked right at me. Looked right at me and smiled. And then my slug tore a 1-inch hole right in the middle of his forehead. I saw the gore burst from the exit wound, splattering a woman in the white gown just behind him. And then I packed my gun and I ran. Sitting in the dark of a rail car that I jumped into, I replayed the incident over in my mind. A clean shot right between the eyes. The target has gone down. Job over. So much for Alexandru's boogeyman. Later that night, I messaged Jacobson, informing him of the kill and letting him know that I expected the rest of my payment from our client. And then I went to bed. I could check the news tomorrow. My alarm went off at 6 a.m. As I rolled to turn it off, I saw the message alert light on my phone. I picked it up and I saw numerous missed calls from Jacobson. I tossed the phone back on the bed, figuring that I would get to those after I brushed my teeth. I switched on the TV. Commercials were running, so I walked over to the bathroom, leaving the door open so I could hear the TV, and I picked up my toothbrush. Soon the anchor came on, and as expected, the story was all about the shooting. As he started reading the details, I choked, and then I gagged, almost throwing up. The words he said made no sense to me. And soon we will be joined live by New York businessman Florin Popescu. Mr. Popescu survived an attempt on his life at a social event in Philadelphia last evening, but fortunately escaped with minor injuries. Minor injuries, my ass, I said out loud as I hustled over to the TV. The anchor held his left hand up to his ear. Okay, I'm being told now that we have a live link with Mr. Popescu in his home. And there he was. Florin Popescu filled the split screen to the right of the presenter. He was sitting on a sofa in an ornately decorated parlor. Mr. Popescu, thank you for joining us. I barely heard the anchor speak. My heart was beating so hard in my chest. I didn't hear the rest of what he had asked. But then Popescu started to talk. Oh, it is no problem, he said with a thick Eastern accent. I willingly make myself available to you. I do not believe in hiding. I do not believe in bowing to these cowards, especially ones with such poor aim. I winced. He continued. We will give the police all their support, because in the end, we will find you, Deadshot. And he winked into the camera. Deadshot? What the hell? That was the nickname my college buddies called me. Very few people knew that name. Maybe it was a coincidence, but I doubted it. Right then in that moment, I believed it all. I believed what Alexandru told me. Whatever Popescu was, he wasn't human. And now he had my scent. So once more, I ran. It's been 2 weeks since that day. Right now, I'm in a small motel in a little town called Lethem in Guyana. I've been in South America for a week now. I'm trying to get as far away from New York as possible. But last night I realized that it doesn't matter how far I go. It may not be far enough. Last night, I was in the Guyanese capital of Georgetown. And as I was walking back to my hotel from getting supper, someone or something came at me. My training is the only reason that I'm alive right now. My training and the fact that I finally took Alexandru's advice and learned all I could about how to kill vampires. The wooden knife I planted in the creature's chest seemed to work. It screamed and it slowly desiccated in front of me. Luminous eyes, fangs, and 2-inch claws, all testament that this was not a human. In life, it would have been a woman. Long dark hair, features that resembled somebody I would rather forget. Alexandru. Yes, so this was the fate that had befallen young Mariana. It was as her father had feared. Well, at least I completed part of what you asked, Alexandru, I thought to myself. I left Georgetown right at that moment, and I traveled even deeper into the depths of Guyana. But they have my location now, and night is coming.